This module is dedicated to Rod Sloan, who suggested I make the whole one-man brand project far more sales-orientated, and to Brian O'Hara, who is the guy who taught me how to sell all those years ago. I've spent quite a lot of the last 5 or 6, 7 years learning how to promote ourselves online and teaching other people how to do it. But, you know, as time has gone on, I've become more convinced that for most small businesses who are actually selling services to other small businesses or larger businesses and who operate locally, the most important thing is to understand how online marketing acts as a backdrop in order to help you carry out face-to-face selling better. After all, you get business by meeting people, unless you're running a mail order business like our Plants for Presents business. So fundamentally, you need to be good at knowing how to network, how to generate referrals, how to sell, and ultimately how to manage others doing it on your behalf. In order to be able to do that, you need to turn sales activity into a process. Most business owners don't do that because they rely on their enthusiasm and their product knowledge and their general integrity to carry the day in a sales situation. I would say you need to be systematic actually about 4 different things. One is about generating leads, and this is really called marketing, and that's what the online area of our activity does. Gaining advocates and collaborators, and this is called networking, and I think it's quite an important shot in your armoury. Finding the right people who can buy things from you and getting them to say yes. This is what's called selling, and actually is probably key to your success. And then, of course, there's service, which is looking after the customers you've already got so that they can buy more from you. A lot of this is about personal interaction, either face-to-face or on the phone. And you need to understand how to put all of this activity together in a systematic way, not only so you're better performing at it yourself, but so that you can hold other people to account when they're doing it for you as your business grows. See, sales is actually quite theatrical. I always say to people that marketing is like the scenery for the play, but the play itself is actually the sort of face-to-face activity that you carry out when you go around meeting people and talking to them. You know, sales isn't just theatre, but it is theatre. In your repertoire, you need to be able to use light and shade, persuasion and silence effectively. It goes better if you do have scenery, a web presence, social proof, etc. But it can happen without, just if you just turn up off the street and start talking to people in a cold calling situation. This is just like street theatre. You can have a play without the scenery. But the most important thing, apart from the scenery, is to make sure that each piece of theatre needs to be embedded in a sales process that helps you make sure that you talk to enough of the right people to make your numbers, and that you go through the systematic stages of the sale so that you know how you're doing and you can forecast whether you're going to make the numbers you need to achieve your targets. So, why is this called The Gospel According to O'Hara? Well, it's named after a chap called Brian O'Hara, who is the guy who taught me how to sell. Once upon a time, back in the mists of 1981, we ran a Commodore dealership. Commodore signed up all kinds of people in the first flush of enthusiasm about selling personal computers, but they soon discovered how useless we all were at selling, and particularly at sales management, and they knew that if their business model was going to work, they'd have to do something about it. Now, in those days, the last word in sales methodology was a company called Olivetti, who basically sold typewriters and then went into word processing. But they lured Brian away from them to create a sales boot camp for all of these rather feckless dealer principles. So he got us all into a room for about 3 days and taught us the basics of sales and, more important, sales management. And 30 years later, we're still using it because it works. And although there are a few other things in this program that I've discovered along the way, which I also think you ought to know, the core of it is going to be what Brian taught us and what we made of it when we went about actually implementing it to manage our own sales force. This is an attempt to get a complete generic sales process onto one slide. I mean, to start with, you need to do some research to find out what else you can sell to your customers. But fundamentally, you've got marketing, which is about generating leads, prospecting, which is about proactively looking for leads of your own, and networking, which is about going out and meeting people who might refer you some leads. Once you've got a lead, you then have to qualify it. This means establishing whether the lead or the prospect will buy from you. Maybe they don't like you. Maybe what you have to offer is not suitable for them. Maybe they haven't got any money. But what the qualification process is about is systematically having a conversation with the customer to establish whether they can buy, whether what you have to have will be useful to them, and whether you're likely to be able to take the deal to conclusion. Once you've established that there is a potential match, then you have to go about demonstrating that you are the right people to help them. That may involve doing a presentation or pitch, or it just may involve having a conversation to thrash out the details of what it is that they want, what it is that you want, and how you would go about fulfilling it. Then you've got to get them to say yes, to go ahead. This is called closing, and traditionally salespeople spend a lot of time trying to be smart about it. But fundamentally, if you've done your job properly, the sale should almost close itself. You need to have convinced the customer that you can fulfill their needs, you can solve whatever problems that they've got, and that all you have to do at the end of the day is just ask for the order and then shut up. Once you've got the sale, then the fun begins, because you have to deliver it in such a way as to meet the customer's expectations that you've raised, and to look after them in such a way that they'll want to come back for more. Fundamentally, that's all there is to it. However, some of us have spent a lifetime trying to get it right. Okay, here's a fairly traditional way of looking at it. I've drawn this as a pyramid, but people sometimes draw it the other way up as a funnel. Fundamentally, what it says is you have a lot of marketing activity, which can be all kinds of things: email shots, going to exhibitions, PR, workshops, networking, referrals, and those turn into a certain proportion of leads. Not everybody who sees your stuff is going to want what you have to offer, but some of them will. And then the next stage is taking these leads and turning them into qualified prospects. Now, traditionally, we talk about finding the man: money, authority, and need. Putting that into English means not everyone will actually be able to buy what you've got to offer. For some people, it won't suit. Other people may want it, but they haven't got enough money. And other people may be convinced, but aren't high enough up the organisational charts to have enough clout to go ahead and buy it. But getting a number of qualified prospects is the most important thing that you do in selling. And people generally are not very good at it. They don't think outside the box. They don't look at how they can make a match between what the customer has got to do, what resources they have, and what it is that we have to offer. And that's where sort of creativity comes in. Once you're sure that actually you could sell what you have to offer to the customer, then you have to find a way of presenting them effectively to them. Typically, when we used to do it with O'Hara, we were selling computer-aided design systems, so people were going to expect a demonstration. You'd want to have a couple of visits. They may have some reasons that they don't see what you want to buy, so you have to handle their objections, and then you go into the closing phase. You know, these days we might consider that to be negotiations, but the fact of the matter is not everybody that you have who's able and capable of buying the product is actually going to buy it, because there's always a law of attrition. Things change, people run out of budget, and not all your qualified prospects end up in a sale. But fundamentally, you have to sort of focus and understand how this this pyramid works for you. This is why I talk about monitoring and doing the numbers. You have to know how many negotiations end up in a sale. You have to know how many qualified prospects on average end up in a serious negotiation. You need to know how many leads it takes to generate a prospect, and you have to know how much marketing you have to come up with to get a lead. If you know all of that, you can actually design an effective sales and marketing strategy, policy, set of tactics, call it what you will. And more importantly, as an owner manager, if you know what your ratios are and how you perform, when in the fullness of time you hit the barrier where you can't sell enough to feed the beast and you need to take somebody else on to help you, you'll have a yardstick for holding them to account. And that's the single most important thing you need if your business is going to grow, from a sales perspective at least. This is pretty fundamental stuff, but it hasn't changed over time. You've got to do a certain amount of activity in order to generate inquiries. It depends on the nature of the business, what it is and what you do. For example, when we started selling our organic vegetables, I thought about this and decided the only way to actually do this was to go and cold call in person. Get some samples together, go in off the street and see the person involved who might buy the produce to resell. For a lot of things that won't work, but if you've got sort of tangible things which are in certain markets, it's a good way of going about it. If you're doing from a cold start, it's hard, because you've got to build some kind of presence in the market. Traditionally, we started that by the ball rolling, by going to exhibitions, because that way you can meet some people who may be interested in what you have to sell. You can, to some extent, qualify them on the stand, and then you can figure out how it is that you're going to go and offer what it is that you want to sell to them. You need to come up with a proposition which is going to appeal to them. And part of the difficulty is that it doesn't really matter how well you do your homework. At the end of the day, you can't really imagine exactly how the market is going to behave. You have to go out and experience it. So prospecting is actually really quite hard work, but it's just something that needs to be done. What you actually want to do, of course, is to try and turn the thing on its head. You want people to come to you. That's where marketing comes in. That's where going networking comes in, where you can generate referrals. I mean, organisations like BNI arrange for people to have breakfast meetings every week where they give each other referrals from the other people that they've met during the week that they've been operating. This business of trading referrals can be quite powerful for the right type of business. Obviously, you couldn't sell aero engines like that, but you do need to think about how it is that you can make it easy for people to give you leads to follow up. One thing that you might do is always ask somebody who you've just sold to for a couple of referrals. As it says here, almost try and make it a condition of doing business that they'll refer a couple of other prospects to you. I'm not going to talk much about lead generation here, but telling your story face to face is what you have to get good at. Networking is all about that. However, in this case, you're not telling it to sell. You're basically having a conversation with people to let them know what you do. Now, all the research that we've carried out suggests that people will refer business to people who they trust and who they're absolutely clear about what it is that they do. So always try and be really focused in creating your story. Don't say more necessarily than you have to, because it's fatally easy to confuse people. If they don't understand what you do, trust me, they won't refer you. So be very clear about what it is. And in terms of following up, always follow people up quickly, because they use that as a surrogate for how trustworthy you are. If you think that networking is a way of going out and selling, then you're kind of missing the point a bit. you always, if you take that view, find yourself in a situation where there are infinitely more people selling than there are people buying. What you need to be is aware that there are plenty of people who have businesses which are complementary to yours, which might actually refer you to people that they know who might have what you need, even if they don't need it themselves. So it's very important that you're able to communicate with them and let them know what it is that you do. Quite often, networking groups end up as a support group, almost a mastermind group, if you like. And it's useful to have a group of people who you can run ideas past, who will support you. Now, most people in the UK seem to prefer a home group of about 20 or 30. But you have to bear in mind that forming those groups, you can either join a organisation like BNI, or you can basically put it together out of other local people who may support you, who are doing similar sort of work. If you want to become successful in that area, the ground rules, as I said earlier, get back to people quickly and always do what you say. You see, the thing is, you need to be clear about what you're doing, but you need to build a reputation for knowing your stuff, being reliable at getting it done, and being easy to work with. Or even being likable. You know, people give business to people they like. Don't forget that. It's important. So that's basically the end of this first chunk, which has covered an overview of it and how to prospect. I thought I'd finish by giving you a rundown of some sales heroes of mine who I'm going to be referring to during the rest of the presentation. First of all is Marcus Cauchi, who is a sort of Sandler trainer. He runs a thing called the President's Club. He's expensive, but my gosh, he puts backbone into people. Then we've got Neil Rackham, who invented spin selling. He did a lot of research with his company Huthwaite. Robin Fielder, who I used to use for refresher training with my team when we sold computer-aided design systems. You can get him at his website there. And finally is Jim Holden, who invented power-based selling. This is really powerful stuff, and you should do yourself a favour and get hold of his book.